I'm Miriam Knight from New Consciousness Review, and I'm speaking with Tom Shadyac, the director of such hit comedies as Ace Ventura, The Nutty Professor, Liar, Liar, and Bruce Almighty. In a dramatic departure, his latest film is an extraordinary documentary about a personal spiritual quest called I Am. In it, he interviews people ranging from Desmond Tutu and Lynn McTaggart to Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn. Tom, can you tell me the meaning behind the title of your film, I Am?
Well, I can only tell you so much because I don't want to spoil the journey of the moviegoer. And it is part of the journey when you discover why it is called I Am. I Am is the original utterance of God in the Judeo-Christian faith. That was serendipity. There's actually a very specific reason why the film is called I Am. And again, you've got to see the movie to understand why. It used to be called Imagine. The film was called Imagine for 2 years while I edited the film, but it didn't quite feel right. I wanted to imagine a different world, a more kind, compassionate, loving world. But when the title I Am came, and again, you have to see the film to see why, it was the only title for the film. It is a very specific, there's a very specific direct reason why it's called I Am.
Okay, well, clearly we'll have to watch the film. In fact,
Yes.
I did watch the film.
Good.
And in it, you set out to answer two questions.
Yes.
One, what's wrong with the world? And two, what can we do about it? So, in your interviews, was there a common theme among the answers that you got?
Well, the reason I went to these specific interviewees was because I did notice a common theme in their work. I noticed that they were all saying the same things. Now, these are many great minds and spirits from various disciplines, from poets to philosophers to academics, religious leaders, scientists. And I noticed that they were all pointing to the same idea. And it was an idea that had come to me about this fundamental underlying endemic problem that creates the other problems. When we look at the world and you ask someone what's wrong with the world, quite often you'll hear what I call symptoms. You'll hear, oh, there's a lot of war, we're in fighting all the time, the environmental crisis, there's an economic crisis, there's a gap between the rich and the poor. These are symptoms of something. And so I started to know this, I started to sense this emerging common reason for these symptoms. And that's why I wanted to talk to these people to identify that. And I believe that the film does have a very specific idea about that underlying fundamental endemic cause to the other problems.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I don't know whether this is giving away, but you have greatly simplified your own life, and you have embarked on a path of service to others. And I think this is one of the messages that comes out of the film. Has that brought you happiness?
Certainly has brought me a deeper level of joy and contentment than I've ever experienced. I'm always careful of the word happiness because it sometimes people think that we're just walking around in a joyful state all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think happiness is embracing grief as well. Mm-hmm. Joy and grief are twin brothers, the yin and the yang of life. And I used to wake up and personally struggle with my own contentment in the morning, and I'd have to read or talk myself into contentment. I no longer have to do that. I think my life was so complicated, and I bought into kind of the societal message of accumulate things and success looks a certain way, and I thought that would bring contentment, and it really did very little for my contentment. In fact, it may have complicated my life to a point where it impeded a certain level of happiness, joy, and purpose. But now that I've simplified my life, and it's said that the three keys to the spiritual life are simplicity, 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 and I've embraced community, I've embraced family, I've embraced a higher purpose. I have felt a purpose and a meaning in my life that is hard to quantify. And I'm going to go deeper into it because it has paid such what I would call, it's the true wealth, I think. Whereas in our society, I think we elevate a kind of false wealth, which is the wealth of stuff and things and money and power of a certain sort. And that is not necessarily, again, improving our happiness levels. Mm-hmm. The true wealth, which is community, service, compassion, connection, sharing whatever your talent, your gifts, your resources, that I think brings a true wealth that I'm discovering in my own life, that I've seen others discover in their lives. That's, again, it's hard to quantify.
Well, certainly your work before this documentary has been focused on what I would consider another component of happiness, which is laughter. I would say that you, more than most people, know just what a gift laughter is. Will you go back to making comedies?
Oh, of course. Yeah, or go forward in making comedies.
Right.
Laughter, I think, is a sacred act to make someone laugh. The Quran says, "He deserves paradise who makes his companions laugh." I consider it a form of prayer, if you will. And I think it's no accident that laughter helps to heal. I explored that in a movie called Patch Adams. Because I've made this shift in my life, some people think that I will no longer even make films. But I think films, again, are ways that we connect with each other. We used to sit around a fire, when we were just, when the humankind was evolving, and we used to tell stories, and now we do it through film. And I love that. I think it's beautiful, and I will continue to participate in it and serve it to the best of my abilities. And comedy is a wonderful way to create vulnerability. You hit someone in the gut, if you will, and that creates a vulnerability, and that opens them up to new ideas, to new thoughts and emotions.
That's an interesting way of putting it, because when you look at some of the violent films coming out of Hollywood, that really closes you down and puts you into fear. So your work is almost the antithesis or the antidote to that.
Well, yeah, it certainly is looking at things a different way. I think that films do have an effect when they're overly violent. I think that it's narrow-minded to think that they don't affect in some way. Now, of course, it's up to the audience member to do with that stimuli what they will. You can go to a violent film and you can come out even a more loving person if you react against that and say, that's not how I want to live my life. That is very clear to me that I want to put out a different energy in the world. But I do think that we filmmakers are very responsible. We should be responsible for what we put out in the world. And I don't think it's fully seeing the whole picture when we think that our films don't have some kind of effect. We do affect.
Absolutely. What do you hope that the film goer will take away from your film, I Am?
Well, it's ultimately about, I call it the ultimate reality show, because I think we craft our societies based on what we think is real, what the real world is, quote unquote. And I think this questions what we've called the real world. This idea that we're very competitive, that human beings are bad in their nature, that it's all bad news, if you will. And so we craft our societies on how do we keep the bad news at bay. This calls that into question. So I hope that people will open up and ask themselves and question whether that's true or not, and question everything that they've been taught. There's a wonderful Walt Whitman poem that says, question everything you've been taught in school, in church, or in any book. And I hope that I Am is an invitation to question whatever may not be true in your life, to have that courage. I think shifting and changing starts with a question. And then I hope people can begin to embrace the idea that if they want to see change in the world, that they have to be it. It's not so much, it doesn't start with changing things on the outside, which I think we're very good at. We're very good at screaming at the angry person or the greedy person out here. But when it comes to changing the greed in our own lives, when it comes to healing the anger in ourselves, that's where I think real change happens. That's why Gandhi was so powerful, because he said, my life is my message. He said, I don't really even want to articulate a message. Look at my life. And his life was simple, it was connected, it was loving, and it was compassionate. So I want to start a conversation with I Am, one that's not happening in our world. I hope people can see that every day on television that we're talking about problems that arise from a perspective. And I want to talk about the perspective and begin to open people up to shifting that perspective.
That is fabulous. I really commend this film to everybody. Tom Shadyac, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Miriam. Appreciate it.